I think one of the things, and this is obviously the inquiry, is very much focused on forward-looking and the prospects for the future. I think one of the very burning issues for us is the idea that of local decision-making and devolving everything locally, and the new way of doing things, measuring things more. I think if you look at the A&E indicator, that's kind of one of the newest, freshest approach to measuring output. And the patient experience domain of the A&E indicator at the moment is a totally devolved domain locally. That it's just up to local organisations to measure patient experience in the way they see fit and just explain it. And if we're talking about comparison, actually one thing that must remain central and must have some kind of coherence is measurement, whether it's patient experience or outputs. You have to measure things in a way that's consistent so that patients can make comparisons between units, but actually so clinicians and managers can see how their units compare to other places.
So in some contexts, devolution is a good thing. In others, this doesn't kind of
Very
work.
bad thing.
Okay. I've got two comments over here.
How can you trust the accuracy of the data? I think that's an issue.
If organisations decide on their own measures, you
Well, there's a term called creative coding in regards to the manipulation of data to bring HSMR figures to make them look better. It's the accuracy of the coding. How can we
That's the important point.
Yeah.
Alana?
So in addition to the assurance, and I think Peter obviously's kite marking looks excellent, there is the role as well around the information centre and some sort of standards around the accuracy and of data from there. But I think we must remember that publishing. So if you don't use the data, then there's no incentive to get it right. And there's always this dilemma, oh, well, the data's rubbish, so we can't publish it. But I think until we start publishing and using the data, we'll never get it right. And we've created one form of publishing called quality accounts, but there are no standards for either what's in it, how it's presented, whether there are comparative benchmarks so that you can say this is good or not, and it's not audited. So, if we're going to commit to these things, then at least let's sort of do them properly.
Absolutely. It's fine to criticise organisations for the quality of the quality accounts, but if there were no expectations on them, yeah, exactly. And
simple point. The thing I've learned mostly, I think, from my time in Staffordshire is that the inordinate amount of time that people spent talking about data, which was either accurate or inaccurate, but actually the importance of the board focusing on the human impact of the data. And I very, very rarely see that in any boards where actually, and the fantastic one is, it's all right to kill 3 people a year with C. diff. What a stupid target that is, that we implement targets which are all about 98% or whatever. Well, what about the 20% or 2% that are poor souls that are dying because we haven't got it right? So I think there's something about understanding that those people are usually the 96-year-old lady that came into A&E that wasn't properly treated, that was malnourished, etc. And that's the area that boards need to deal with. Otherwise, that data's meaningless.
So impact, not statistics, is the key.
Well, it's both. That's what I'm saying. It's getting the data right, but actually understanding what the human impact of it is.
There's also a problem about the manipulation of data rather than actually falsifying data. I mean, like, for instance, the ambulances being kept outside the casualty department at the John Radcliffe Hospital about 10 years ago, or something I know a bit more about, which is how clinicians, if they want to refer on to another clinician, people will be aware of what's known as the RTT18 pathway. Those patients are discharged back to the care of their GP to re-refer them to another clinician if you want another specialty opinion, because otherwise the pathway is open and the hospital gets fined. That puts the GPs to inconvenience. It actually lengthens the process because the GP's got to re-refer them to the next specialty down the line. And these things just get in the way of common sense that clinicians would like to apply to their patient care.
There's 2 things in what you're highlighting there. One is about the perverse incentives that setting a target with a common set of measurements will engender in the way that people behave, but also some of the ways that measures are set that don't bear any resemblance to the sort of things that clinicians would find sensible.
Because if you go into the street and you tell people in the street these stories, they say, how ridiculous. And there's an awful lot of how ridiculous in the NHS.
And your solution?
Well, my solution is that if I want to refer a patient to another specialty, I should be able to do that without my hospital being fined, because it's sensible and I want to be in the driving seat. It's just as simple as that.
Sorry, what stops you from doing that?
Because the pathway for the 18-week treatment is still open.
Yes,
So
but you have the choice of where you make the referral.
yes, I have the choice of where I make the referral, but not in terms of time. In terms of time,
But
that
what's
patient
right for
must
the
be
patient?
treated within 18 weeks.
So what is right for the patient?
What's right for the patient is that the patient really, is the patient being put to inconvenience rather than danger.
So what I'm saying is that I think there is something wrong then, not necessarily with the system, but within the organisation that takes away that clinical choice, because the decision, the 18-week pathway for all its rights and wrongs should not be removing the responsibility of the clinician to do what's right for the patient.
You're raising, I'm not going to let this go on too long, because you're raising some really, really important things that I know we're going to come back to in our seminar on culture and the relationship between managers and doctors, and why don't clinicians challenge the managers. But any other comments on Robert's question? No.
I feel quite ambivalent about the data question. I remember back in the 1990s going up to Scotland when they first announced mortality data, and it sent a sort of shiver through the whole medical profession and indeed among the management class as well. This was all going to be absolutely terrible. The media would go wild. It would be the end of the world. And it was really the beginning of the opening of Pandora's box. And I think in fact, it didn't cause a massive scandal. There was a hospital, I think, that was identified as being the worst hospital in Scotland for all of one day, and then people kind of got on with their lives. And I think that was a brave first move in a journey which we've all been going. And I think if you look at what the cardiothoracic surgeons have done in terms of their data and identifying individual performance and so on, easier, of course, for them than some other specialists. That's all makes me optimistic. And certainly from our point of view, I think the GMC has spent probably 150 years not really using its data or publishing its data or analysing trends, and I think we've got to do a lot more about that and holding that mirror up that you were talking earlier. On the other hand, I do think we still suffer a bit from the Sir Ian Kennedy phrase, we're awash with data, and not enough analysis of what is important and identifying those bits are important. I think we are on the lower foothills of this stuff. I suspect that we are going to see significant change driven by technology, where we are able to identify aspects of performance much more clearly, both at individual team and in other ways. And we just have to be very careful that we don't misuse or abuse that data going forward.
Alistair, very quickly.
Yes, very quickly. A throwaway line on something that Neil's just said, which picks up the point about not reinventing the wheel. In terms of analysing data, there are plenty of examples around the service of organisations that do it purposefully, do it well, and rather than us all disappearing down a burrow and trying to do it ourselves.